The Mizuno Wave Exceed Tour 4 has been named Tennis Magazine's Best in Shoe, or Best Shoe of 2020. But does it deserve that title? You know we're gonna find out. Hey everybody, it's Zach. Typically during my tennis shoe reviews, first I'm play testing them on court, then waiting a few weeks after I've played in them to cut them open to see what's under the hood. However, if we want to see if the Mizuno Wave Exceed Tour 4s really are the best tennis shoes of 2020, I think we need to do all those tests combined. So today we're gonna play test them, including the serve, infrared, and suicide test, and then take them to the workshop and cut them open to see what's under the hood and see if they really deserve the title of Best in Shoe 2020. So let's get to hitting with them right now. So for a shoe to be considered the shoe of the year, at least by my standards, it better be durable and stable, lightweight, fast, and breathable, and comfortable right out of the box. Most importantly, it better do all of those things better than any other shoe available that year. Now, another thing I think is really important if you're gonna call this shoe the shoe of the year is that the outsole tread and the shoe itself be at least somewhat of an all-court shoe. Now, if you look at the tread on the Mizunos, you'll notice it is a modified herringbone. However, it is way too narrow of a herringbone to be considered a clay court shoe. There's barely any channels here. Now, this outsole tread reminds me more of like a racing skid. They have a lot of air channels going through them, which is great for a hard court. It's gonna grip the hard courts pretty well, and it's gonna allow you to slide. Now, the big minus to me about the treads of these shoes is these little gaps in the outsole where you can see straight on through to the midsole of the shoe. Now, anytime you put holes in the outsole, you're gonna decrease the integrity of that outsole. That means it's not gonna respond as well to you, and that means that it's gonna wear in these spots more than others. It's just, decreasing the integrity of the shoe. Mizuno has placed a lot of marketing into the durability of their outsole, and I did find with the Dremel test, highest grit sandpaper 10 seconds, only 1 millimeter of damage. However, the outsole tread is only 4.5 millimeters thick, whereas the Court FF2 is 5 millimeters and the Vapor Cage 4 is almost 6. Now, I also wanted to get a look at those holes in the outsole and see how far they came in on the midsole. And when I cut them open, I did find that they weren't all the way through to the foam of the midsole. There were these little very, very thin plastic shells right under there. So not as bad as going through to the foam, however, still not as good as a continuous outsole. So I've been playing with these shoes for about 2 days now, and I will say they did break in very quick. However, there is one spot that's still a little bit bothersome, and that's right from my second toe to my fifth toe, right where they bend. There is still a crease there. So every time I move on the balls of my foot to split step, I do still feel that crease. I'm just walking around in them, picking up balls. I don't notice it, but as soon as I get up on the balls of my foot, I do notice that crease still after 2 days. I think one of the main reasons that these shoes still had a crease along my metatarsal heads is that there's just a lot of polyurethane in the upper, and there's a lot of creases in that polyurethane for the air channels. The upper of these shoes is just about all polyurethane and mesh, which is good for durability and good for breathability. However, with all those diamond patterns on the upper, you're gonna get areas of creasing. When I removed the first layer of the upper to the second mesh and padding layer, I did find that there was a reinforcement along the shoelace eyelet line, which is nice. That helps disperse tension and gives you a more even fit of the shoe. The heel counter on the Wave Exceeds is not as stiff as some other shoes. However, there is quite a bit of stitching and foxing around the heel counter, which does make up for that. Now, the durability test of the upper using the Dremel highest grit sandpaper for 10 seconds showed barely a millimeter of damage, so Mizuno can lay claim to one of the lightest, most durable shoes of 2020 for sure. Now, one thing I'm noticing about these shoes that's different from every other that I've play tested this year is just how responsive that shank is in them. I'm really getting a lot of feedback. Now, if you look at the Mizunos from the outside, you'll see the shank that's in the midfoot on the arch, as well as a piece of shank material on the heel cup of the shoe. Now, I wanted to see if that shank material on the heel actually went underneath the heel to provide any control and stability, or if it was just the window dressing on the outside. And if you look on the shoe once it's cut in half, you'll see it does go almost to the midpoint of the shoe, and it does connect to the arch where the shank is on the arch of the shoe. So you have from medial to lateral, from heel to arch, a really nice, responsive, stiff shank. Now I'd say one of the best arguments for this shoe being the shoe of the year is its weight. It's only 12.4 ounces, yet you do get a lot of padding in the upper, and they stuffed the midsole with foam and gave you a really responsive shank. Now one thing Mizuno did not overlook was the stitched in insole. It is a nice, thick, and dense stitched in insole with the green material you can see. The same cannot be said for parts of the midsole, however. The midsole, however, it is thick, it is not very dense. I can kind of push it in with my fingers, as you can see, pretty easily in the heel and in the forefoot. Now that being said about the midsole, there is still a really nice shank on these shoes. You still have a 2.5 centimeter heel height and only a 1.4 centimeter heel to toe drop. So when everything is combined, you still have some pretty good guts to this shoe. That was a good lob anyway. But anyway, the width of the Mizuno Wave Exceed Tour 4s is not as wide as maybe some would say. It is definitely wider than the 3s, and a narrow medium to medium wide, almost up to about a 2E will fit these fine. However, if you have an excessively wide foot, they're probably gonna have a hard time breaking in. Why are these shoes still not great for somebody with an excessively wide foot? Well, if you look at the lateral flange on these shoes, it's just not that wide. There's just not that much room in the toe box. So even though they made the shoe as a whole a little wider, the last is still inflared, and you're still getting a pretty shallow lateral flange. It's not very fat, it's not very wide. That took me like 14 takes. But anyway, the feel of the Mizuno Wave Exceed Tour 4s is not that of other responsive shoes. So these shoes do feel pretty plush in the heel, very comfortable in the heel. In the forefoot, however, I do feel like I'm getting pretty low to the ground with my forefoot. They don't have that cushion or bounce like, say, the GP Turbos do, the Sole Court Boost, the Vapor Cage 4s, the Gel Resolution 8s. But it does feel responsive cutting side to side and moving front to back toward balls. On the serve test, I got 22 centimeters of serve height, which was pretty much in line with most other shoes I've tested this year. I think the reason you can get that kind of height is number one, the shoe is really light. Number two, the shank can store a lot of potential energy. I came in at 14.42 seconds on the suicide test today with these shoes. I think number one, I've been doing the suicide test a lot more than I normally do, so I'm getting better at it. And number two though, the treads on these, those racing skid treads, really interact with hard courts really well. You do get a really nice push off on a hard court. So what I noticed about these shoes during the suicide test is when I go to push off or when I go to throw myself into a turn, they perform fine. However, when I go to plant and go back the other direction, I do notice my foot starting to roll in these shoes. And that again is because of that lack of the fat lateral flange. There's not as much stability in that shoe pushing off the other direction. Moving toward that direction is fine. Going sideways is fine. It's just coming back the other direction that these shoes don't perform as well as something, say, like the Sole Court Boost or the Court FF2s. The infrared test showed these shoes rising 23 degrees. However, on-court temperature also rose 6. So are the Mizuno Wave Exceed Tour 4s the best tennis shoe of 2020? Well, they're not as stable and they don't cut as well as the Asics Court FF2. They're not as bouncy and responsive as the Nike GP Turbos, and they're not as stable as the Adidas Sole Court Boosts. So I will say they're probably the best lightweight shoe of 2020, but they just don't excel in enough categories for them to be considered, for me, the best all-around shoe of 2020. I think for my money, that award probably goes to the Nike GP Turbos if you're playing on hard courts, or the Adidas Sole Court Boost, which to me is the best all-around tennis shoe you can buy. So what do you think is the best tennis shoe of 2020? There have been a bunch of really great shoes that have come out this year, and even some older shoes that are still available in 2020 that I think are great. Let me know in the comments down below. All right, everybody, again, if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about these shoes, and if you've played with them, let me know your experience, especially if you played with them on clay with this hard court tread. Let me know. Otherwise, hope everyone has a great day, great night, wherever you're tuning in from, and I'll see you next time.